Welcome to the Platform to Perform podcast, the podcast for athletes, coaches, and anyone looking to perform at their highest level. If performance is your goal, we aim to provide you with a platform to perform. I'm your host, as always, Todd Davidson, and on episode 17 of the Platform to Perform podcast, I'm joined by Tommy Munday of Game Sharp Performance and Boxing Science. How are you doing today, Tommy?
Not too bad, thanks, mate. Are you yourself?
Yeah, coping all right, mate. Coping all right. So do you want to, for the listeners who've not heard, who don't know anything about you, do you want to give the listeners a little bit more of an intro into your background and why you do what you do?
No worries. No, thanks very much for having me on. First of all, it's been like a real privilege to be asked to come on and speak and just chat training. Really, like we're all mad into it, aren't we? And we all like talking about it a lot. So, yeah, I'm Tommy. I'm currently working for Manchester United Women FC as the assistant strength and conditioning coach with the women's first team and also the women's under-21s academy side. As alongside that, I do some one-to-one work with just a few footballers, and that's under the heading of Game Sharp Performance, which is something that I set up with my friends Sam and Chris, and we deliver some physical work, which me and Sam look after, and then some technical preparation work, which Chris, who's a technical lead, he looks after more of that. I suppose how I got into the strength and conditioning, I used to box a lot when I was younger. So I did a lot of that, competed at it for a number of years within the Northwest, out of Macclesfield Boys Boxing Club. And I think really it all started from just wanting to get myself as game and as fit as I possibly could. And I loved a scrap. And the fights that fascinated me were the Mickey Ward, Arturo Gatti and stuff like Jamie Moore and Matthew Macklin. Like, I used to watch these fights a hell of an amount, and the limiting factor in these performances seemed to be the physicality and also like how bad they wanted it mentally, but really digging in and being as game and as fit and as strong as you could is obviously a big part of boxing. And by logic, I suppose you look for, in terms of how I'm going to get myself like that or as close to that as I can possibly be, you look to who is the best at that. So you look to people like Manny Pacquiao or whoever's the fastest, whoever's the fittest. And then I suppose after that, you start looking, logic defies that, you start looking towards the different sports. So who are the fittest athletes of the world? So you start looking at how do 10,000 meter runners train? You need to be fast, right? How do sprinters train? You need to be strong, right? How do powerlifters train? And you just get like, a lot of this starts on YouTube, but it's just a rabbit hole of how are these people the best in the world at what they do, and how can I use that information to help me be better? So even stuff like how do CrossFitters train? How do the Marines train? Things like that. So it's just started like purchasing books like The Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, things like that, going on daft courses and things, just little level 1s and level 2s in various different things, and starting to visit different S&C coaches and getting to grips with, right, this whole idea of physical preparation is called strength and conditioning, I suppose. Around 15, 16, I was doing a lot of training for the boxing and stuff like that, and a few of my dad's pals were running football teams, and they asked whether it was for my benefit or their benefit. They asked, will you come down and do a bit of the stuff you do with the boxers and the stuff you do as part of your boxing training? And a lot of that was just delivering a little bit of a warm-up or delivering a little bit of fitness work and things like that. And then that progressed to doing my FA level 2, just because I wanted to get more coaching badges under my belt. And then starting to really, I got involved with a side in Sheffield called Wisewood Juniors, and started, I suppose, without knowing what to do or having a great idea, in my first year of uni, delivering strength and conditioning to them. And that started as warm-ups and things like that. And as I got better at it, getting a little bit of an understanding of how do I get them a little bit quicker, how do I get them a little bit fitter. And to be honest, like that was my first little thing that I did in terms of like strength and conditioning. So going off that, wanting to be better at the boxing as well, I found out about Boxing Science, which was massive, from Alan Ruddock and Danny Wilson. And they were running an absolutely amazing program in Sheffield, and I wanted to get involved with that as well. And that was one of the factors that led me to going to Sheffield Hallam Uni. And while still boxing, I got involved with that program just to help me get better physically. And then once I knocked the boxing on the head, I was pestering Danny and Alan so much for different questions and just wanting to learn more, really. And I suppose that I pestered them enough that they gave me a bit of an internship, which was amazing. And I was absolutely buzzing. So all throughout my second year, I started helping them out, which in third year and fourth year of uni. And I absolutely loved it. Learned so much from Danny and Alan. They're absolutely amazing. Put so much time and effort into me, which was fantastic. And then alongside that, doing different internships with Sheffield Wednesday Football Club, going to work with Tim Jarrett in Leeds, who runs an amazing program up there with the university, and then just spending, whether it's days or weeks, with different programs around Sheffield. I was really lucky to be there in that sense. So quite a long-winded answer, but just really, I suppose that's probably a similar answer to what a lot of people will give. It just comes from a fascination of how can you physically prepare the body better.
Oh, yeah, 100%. There's a couple of things you said there that, again, I didn't jot these down in the podcast questions that I sent to you, but just keen on your thoughts. So the first one is, because when I boxed, again, you sort of get, it was almost a bit like the military. You just get fed this mantra, it's all about being mentally tough. And when you're in that environment, you sort of go with it, like, yeah, I need to be mentally tough. But you never actually talk about what that actually means. And I think everyone's got a slightly different version of what their interpretation it means to them. So as a long-winded question, when I watch stuff like the SAS, Who Dares Wins, and they talk about being mentally tough, I think you can be as mentally tough as you want when, I don't know, you're holding 40 kilos above your head, sandbag. But if your best overhead press is, say, 30 kilos, that mental toughness is irrelevant because you haven't got the physical buffer to allow you to dig deep. So what's your interpretation of being mentally tough, and to what extent do you think it's a strength and conditioning or a technical coach's responsibility to develop that mental toughness?
Oh, it's a really tough question. That I suppose that it's a sense of what does that look like. So you've got a group of 20 athletes and you get asked who is mentally the toughest out of all of these, and I think the physical capacity to do it, but part of that to me comes down from being coachable as well. So even if an athlete really has the ability to dig deep and really push themselves in, whether that's a running task or a circuit task, whatever you've given them, to me, if they're not coachable as well at the same time, and they don't on the slower type movements and the more technical refined movements, if they're not coachable and they're not open to change and they're not open to wanting to be better, no matter how hard they push themselves, that to me wouldn't say they're very mentally tough. In terms of whether it's an S&C coach's role to develop that within athletes, you have to make them robust, and you have to get them in a position where they can technically thrive. So part of that journey to making them robust, yes, they will have to learn to dig deep at some point, whether that's an innate quality or something that can be taught. I think just exposure to finding things tough and exposure to being outside the comfort zone, whether that's learning something new or being challenged on something that's very familiar, I think that the S&C coach can provide that sort of stimulus. Mm-hmm. And constantly taking athletes outside the comfort zone, that would help them be in a position where they can technically thrive. Quite a long, I'm going on a bit on a quite a long. But yeah, I think that it can be done. I don't think it should be a focal point of the program, though. No, I don't think your job as an S&C coach should be, I need to make these athletes more mentally tough.
Yeah. And the reason why I asked the question is because, as you said, there's so many differences between people's interpretation. Like, for example, I know in a podcast that I heard with the head of GB Judo at the time, he said that GB Judo, for example, when it came to sparring matches, they would have they would tell the judges or the referees, they're bringing the judges, the referees, sorry, and they would tell them to deliberately be harsh or more lenient towards one of the athletes just to see how the other athlete would respond, because the other athlete would have no idea that the referee was supposedly in on it. You also mentioned, and I think every S&C coach goes through this, myself included, where you almost become a sponge and you, as you said, you want to read this book, do this course, gain experience here, here, and here, which is great for us who really value this training side of things. How would you say a parent, a technical coach, or somebody who is not a strength and conditioning coach should go about working out what's just crap on social media and what's actually fundamentally good practice, if that makes sense?
It's tough, because as a parent, you should want the best for your child, and 99% of parents do, and they're absolutely fantastic, and they invest time and money into whether it's driving the kids around or they are paying for services and resources. As a parent, I think it's who doesn't know much about the sport or the task. I think it's very tough to identify what is fluff and what is honest best practice. I think the UKSCA accreditation is hopefully a good standpoint on whether someone is qualified to deliver strength and conditioning to your child or not. I think that it's not the be all and end all, but I think that would differentiate someone who would be in a better position to deliver best practice to your child or not. I think I'd advise parents to look for that in terms of after looking out for strength and conditioning. But like I say, it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, it is a really tricky, like you said, go on.
And I think just being open to things as well as a parent, because they'll have things that worked for, if they've competed at sport before, they'll have things that worked for them, and they'll have people they know, and they'll have people they trust. And trust is going to be a big part of it. And I think you can generally tell, just if you're an okay judge of character, who has got a genuine interest in making your child better at their sport, and who has got a genuine interest of, well, a non-genuine interest, I suppose.
Yeah, I like that. Again, I appreciate I'm absolutely hammering you with questions I'm not prepared you for here. But going back to I'm going to talk about visibility versus credibility, and as an S&C coach, balancing putting out content that is going to stand out and that's going to appeal to a certain market and get them into your funnel, if you will. So being visible, which there's obviously some practitioners who are unbelievably visible, tons of followers, but then you look at the actual content as an S&C coach and you're like, are you credible? How is S&C coaches, so whether it's, I don't know, yourself with your Game Sharp performance stuff, myself with, for example, calisthenics kids, balancing the stuff that's going to look appealing, but is also of best benefit to the people who need to see it, if that question makes any sort of sense? Because to give a little bit of context to that, the things that typically make athletes better aren't necessarily the stuff that looks great on social media, as an example.
I think that there's been a good shift towards what is best practice and what is good delivery. I would hope that, obviously, if you're going to get people into your funnel, like, for example, or like you put it there, you're going to get people into your funnel. First of all, that content has to be visible, and it has to be eye-catching, and it has to be something fun and exciting and engaging. If we take something like like an altitude landing off a box, that might be best practice for a kid, but it's not. If you put that on social media, it probably doesn't look great. Off a small box, it doesn't look exciting, and it doesn't look very tough or challenging either. But that probably is a really, really good stimulus for developing what you want to develop with a youth athlete. I think things like the Strength Lab Superheroes, Simon Brundish does an absolutely amazing job, because he has nailed visibility and credibility, because that is how we've branded that and put it together, is amazing because it's exciting, it's visible, it's eye-catching, but it's also best practice.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, if you've got something that is fantastic and really develops your youth athletes, but it doesn't look very good, you're not going to get those athletes in the first place. So you're not going to get a chance to even deliver your practice. So it's a really tough question all the time. I think you've got to stick to your principles. You've got to stick to, right, what is it I do and what is it I want to do and what do I not do as well. So I've put stuff on social media, and like I'm still like relatively new to this. As you can tell, I'm only 22, like, so. But I've put stuff on and I thought, nah, that don't look great. Or like I've done a counter movement jump or something daft like that, or a sprint drill, and I thought, nah, my foot's wrong there, or my toes aren't into my shin or something like that. But really, does it matter?
No.
If anything, this lockdown's taught me that most things work. So a parent or a child or someone that I want to work with will not notice that. And I will get the chance to, hopefully, if that person's engaged with it, hopefully they will want to come in and they will want to get better, and then I can deliver the best practice anyway. So as long as you're trying to be as credible as you can, I think the visibility probably comes second.
Oh, I thought that was an absolutely superb answer. And again, Simon Bruntish's Strength Lab Superheroes, absolutely superb. I'll pop that in the show notes. In regards to being in lockdown then, as a coach or even as athletes, what do you think are some of the key qualities that we can be looking to develop given these weird and wonderful circumstances? So you can answer that whether it's talking about your own coaching development or the athletes that you work with.
So the athletes that I work with, the girls have been absolutely fantastic. Like their season got cancelled pretty early on, I think in end of March. So pretty soon after we went into lockdown, their season got wrapped up by the FA, and they still had basically 6 weeks where if they weren't training, they weren't probably going to be doing too much, and they engaged really well with the training content I put out there. And I think that I was quite lenient whether they did it or not, and by being quite lenient and quite open, if they missed a session or they did something else, for example, they played football in the back garden with a brother instead of doing the speed session, or they played badminton, or they just felt like going for a run, or they got nominated to do the 5K challenge, whatever. They told me that, and they were very approachable, and they were very honest, and that taught me that having that trust in your athletes and being open and being approachable and not being and trying to be quite understanding and quite empathetic with this situation, understanding that they'll have days where they're motivated and not motivated as well. That taught me quite a lot, that they're just putting the trust in the athletes, because at the end of the day, they're the ones doing the training, and it's their training. You're just there to slightly facilitate the journey, and you're not really nowhere near as important as you think, because you're not very much in control of that situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think maybe this is just me talking about my own journey. Maybe this is similar for other S&C coaches, but I think you almost go through a learning curve, especially when you're just out of university, where you're like, oh, well, the most physically dominant athlete is going to win all the time, and therefore I'm the most important piece of the puzzle, to thinking actually, well, as you said in a boxing example, if I'm as physically conditioned as I like, but I go up to someone as skilled as Floyd Mayweather, then the conditioning is almost irrelevant, because he is technically better and I'm not as big a piece of the puzzle as I think. How do you mentioned trust a couple of times there. Obviously you've got a boxing background, both from actually doing the sport and from being involved as a strength and conditioning coach. How do you go about building that trust with your athletes? And do you find that's different in different sports, or do you apply the same sort of principles?
So I was really lucky with the boxing, because the way it worked while I was at uni, I do boxing science in the mornings and deliver the strength conditioning, and then I got stuck in with the boxing coaching as well, which I'm not currently doing at the moment, but I really enjoyed, and I was trying to get better at as well. So coaching the boxing in the evenings and going to uni in the day, that was my days really. So I had all the lads were my pals as well, so they were all lads that I knew who I was coaching, which was great, because we already had a really good really good bond, and I think they knew that I could be honest with them, and they knew that when they needed to push themselves, and when I need to push them as well, and when they need to pull back, and when I need to pull them back as well. So that was that. I never really had it where I'd have to build the trust. It was hopefully, because as well, this is the other thing, they trusted in Danny and Alan already, because they're top lads, and like they're clearly integral, they're credible, and then just by being associated with them, you get a little bit more buy-in already, rightly or wrongly. With the athletes that I work with now, I think just trying not to force it. And I think that this concept of buy-in, and like obviously just take it with a pinch of salt what I'm saying, because I'm still new to this, but this concept of buy-in and trying to build it and trying to force it, I'm unsure about it sometimes. And I think if the athletes can see that your primary goal is to make them better, and you're showing that, and you put in the effort and you put the time with them, and you make it clear, you don't even have to show them deliberately, but you're just honest and integral, and you are genuinely trying to make them better. I think no matter what your personality, as long as you're pretty sound and you're pretty nice, I think you can probably get some good buy-in without having to really, really try it getting the buy-in. Just try it at being better at the job. And
it's funny because there's obviously, I'm not going to name specific books or anything, but there's books which have gone mad about coaching buying, and as if it's this elaborate process. But at the end of the day, the key message of the books is basically don't be a dickhead and show that you care, and people will like you and be more likely to do stuff for people they like. I do agree with you that you do hear a lot of, it's all about the buying, and yes, that's important, but almost like it's a light switch and I've either got it or I haven't. And that there's some kind of more complicated process than simply being a decent coach at the end of the day.
I'd hate to be at a point where, I'd hate to be at a point where I was actively looking for how can I get buy-in. I think the less that I try and think about it, the less that would hopefully be a problem for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, as you said, if you get to a point where you're actively looking for it, prevention being better than a cure, or that, you've probably missed the mark to a certain degree.
Hopefully, but in 5 years' time, Todd, that my opinion might have completely changed on that. That's just where I currently stand with it now. And I have read a few of these books, and there is absolute gold dust in that. And I think that for some coaches, they do probably need that. But what I've been lucky with is, I was speaking to Lewis Cunningham about this the other day from Middlesbrough. We were saying that I've been really lucky to be around good coaches, whether that's in the box or in the football. And if you've been under good coaches, you generally just copy what they do. And I've had that stuff like Brendan Warburton is from Sheffield. He's one of my mentors in terms of coaching. I started coaching in the Yorkshire accent. Like you just pick up things. It sounds proper daft, and you just pick up things from people without even really noticing.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Almost mannerisms, and before you know it, it's part of your repertoire without even realising. It's like, well, are you from Yorkshire? No, but... So diving more specifically into your boxing science stuff. So you mentioned how that came about in your own boxing background. So we're going to get a little bit more specific and more technical. But just as an overview, I'm a coach, and I come to you and I'm like, right, I thought I knew about fitness because I've trained boxers for years. Actually, we're not getting the results in the ring. Help me out. Walk me through the process of whether it's assessment or finding out what a boxer's weakness is from a strength and conditioning perspective. What does that process look like?
So we've got a pretty good, robust testing battery, what we're pretty happy with. So essentially, we're looking for the physical limiting factors that allow a boxer to punch as hard as they like, as often as they like, and when they like, I suppose. So broken down, we're trying to get the boxers who are the fittest, the fastest, and also the strongest. We're quite simply, like all this like reverse engineering stuff, I absolutely love it. Like, I know it's quite cliche, but that's what we're looking for. So we're looking for, in a non-skillful task, for example, a counter movement jump, how high can they jump? We're looking at how fit are they? Can they repeat and recover from high intensity efforts? With things like the 30-15 test on the treadmill, that'll be a key test as well. How fast are they in that sense? So we look at things like reactive strength indexes, and we also look at this within the punching action in terms of a landmine punch test. And then we do more tests off the back of that. We look at their overhead squat, their single leg squats. How well do they move? Is there any restrictions that stop them from moving well? And if so, where would these translate into punching actions? And and then we compare them against, we've got about 500 data entries, which is amazing. So we can basically pull out of the data set. We know what an 18-year-old flyweight amateur should look like. We also know what a lightweight senior professional should look like. So we've got enough data, and we just compare them against that. Are you any good? This is where you're strong. This is where you're not so strong. And then you just kind of match it up from there. What's helping you perform well? Let's make that better. What's stopping you from performing well? Let's make that better.
And just before we dive into, again, going more technical into that, so RSI, if people have never heard of it, you've done a brilliant presentation on YouTube, which I'm going to link in the show notes for anyone that's interested. But what is RSI for boxing? And as a random example, I'm a boxing coach, I say to you, but we're not jumping in the ring. We're not dealing with jumping athletes. Why do I care? So what is RSI? Why should I care?
So RSI, the reactive strength index, is basically within a drop jump or a pogo jump test. We're looking at how high can a boxer jump and how long does it take them in terms of ground contact time to jump that high. So essentially we're looking at impulse, which is jump height, and how long does it take them to produce enough force to achieve that jump height. So we're looking at flight time over contact time. So essentially you can improve your RSI by spending less time on the floor and developing said amount of force more quickly, or you can develop more force in the same time window on the floor and you can jump higher. So essentially someone that's going to perform better in RSI is someone that's very, very springy. If we look at team sports, RSI is associated with top speed running and spending less time on the floor and achieving better stride lengths and frequencies. And we're looking at, within short time frames, how much force athletes can produce, I suppose. And what was your next question? Sorry, Todd.
My next question was, how would you sell that to a boxing coach who says, for example, that's great, but I'm dealing with boxers rather than jumping athletes?
Yeah, so the limiting factor to RSI is primarily ankle stiffness, because no matter how much force gets produced through the entire chain, if the ankle can't handle that, I suppose, then some of that force gets leaked. And I use leaked with inverted commas. We know from research and from practice as well that punching hard depends on a lot of impulse through the lower body. And to punch hard, you need to do it quickly, otherwise the opportunity is gone. So we know that the physically and physiologically, the limiting factors to punching hard can be seen within this movement. Even though they're not jumping, force is transmitted in slightly different directions. The time frames of the movement and the joint actions and where the force is coming from are dictated to by similar qualities as this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's spot on, mate. Spot on. Again, it wasn't me trying to be awkward with the questions. I just like thinking up these scenarios in my head. So let's say, for example, you'll have, I was thinking whether to name names or not, but you'll have boxers who can punch very hard, but they're what I would probably describe as maybe a banger or a concussive puncher, but they're not necessarily the quickest. And you'll also have boxers who are lightning fast. You don't even see the punch coming, and it's more that you didn't see it coming, therefore it's caused some damage. How would you expect those two boxers to present in terms of their RSIs, if that makes sense? So let's say they both punch, they both have reasonably good knockout ratios, but boxer A tends to be more of a stoppage kind of guy, not necessarily lightning fast, but a bit of a decent dig. Boxer B, lightning fast, you don't see the punches coming. So they both have good, same knockout ratios, but achieve those knockouts in different ways. Would you expect to see any difference if you were to take them through your testing battery?
So I'm going to go through two scenarios, I think. So if we had a scenario which is the most likely outcome what I'd expect, I would expect that a lighter, faster boxer and someone who throws a lot of punches, throws them very, very quickly, would have a better RSI. Mm-hmm. Because the ankle stiffness and the time they need to take to produce said amount of force isn't probably too long. That would be my prediction. If they both had the same RSI, I would expect that boxer B would spend a lot less time on the floor, but probably not jump as high. Equal RSI, the boxer A would jump a lot higher, but take a little bit longer to produce that force. That's just in terms of physical limiting factors.
Yeah, and again,
sorry.
No, go on.
Now, no matter what, if neither is technically that good, and then they're probably not going to punch very hard. And likewise, they can punch very, very hard just by being technically fantastic. The timing, everything around it being superb, and the intent and dig behind it can be fantastic without having the physical capacity. So the way I see it, if you improve your physical capacity, you improve your RSI, you improve your force production, you're just adding a little bit more to the puzzle. Mm. Even if you're technically good already, you're probably just increasing your chances of being better. That's how I sort of see it. So it's probably not going to do you any harm. You know what I mean?
That's funny like that. It just reminds me, that's like a comprehensive answer, and then you get to this like, but will I punch like Deontay Wilder after this 8-week block of plyometrics? It probably won't do you any harm. That's the most concrete answer I can give you. So again, another difficult question, I guess. So using those same boxer A, boxer B, we spoke about reverse engineering. Do you think you would, and again, I appreciate this is more of a hypothetical question, do you think you would get more return from investment working on the boxer's weakness in this RSI example, or the boxer's strength? That's my first part of the question. And the second part is, have you got any ideas in your head as to how that might fit together, where you're trying to make their strength a super strength and then try and reduce the extent to which their weakness is a weakness, if that question makes sense?
Yeah. Stuart McMillan on the Altis podcast with Pacey Performance the other day, that he absolutely nailed this for me. And he said that working on their strengths closer to competition, they'll draw a lot of confidence from, and they'll also enjoy the training. Happy athlete's a dangerous athlete, and also they'll probably get more return from, because that sort of defines them as an athlete. So this concept of really turning the strengths into super strengths around competition and turning the weaknesses into strengths away from competition, I really like, because I think that it probably makes an athlete tick. Also, athletes tend to like things more what they're good at. So if I just take like the girls this year, the ones who have got the best counter movement jumps are very concerned about their counter movement jump scores. Likewise, the ones who've got the best RSIs and not necessarily the best counter movement jumps, they're concerned about their RSI score. So if we take the girl who's got the best RSI score, she loves knowing what her RSI score is. So if that improves, she can take so much confidence from that. If she was a boxer and she was concerned about that, and she looks at a testing sheet, she instantly looks to RSI, that's gone up. The confidence that she will take from that will outweigh even the physical benefit, just because she knows she's in a good place. Or she knows she's in a good place. Likewise, like I say, they'll probably look to what they're best at first. For me, that's how I'd say it as well. So there's the mental standpoint and the psychological standpoint. And if you, as a coach, place a lot of emphasis on that as well and say this is a key performance indicator for you, this defines you as an athlete, this is your strength, we're going to work on that. That confidence just flows.
Yeah.
From a physical standpoint, I would definitely agree that this will probably, attacking their strengths and making them super strengths will probably make them better. Like we've got boxers who are probably never going to be that strong. They're strong enough, but they draw a lot of confidence. They like the explosive work. They feel good, and it makes them train better as well. And if you get them technically training better and technically feeling better during training sessions, then I think you're flying really. Because you're not just aiming to get them better in competition. You're also trying to give them the capacity where they can technically thrive in their technical work, and whether that's sparring, whether it's just pads, whether it's bags, shadow, whatever. That's more pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and I think you always know you're speaking with an experienced coach when they realise it's not just about the physical. Like, even if you look into, I don't know if you've seen much of work, Mike Teixeira's work with powerlifters and reactive training systems. And he basically says like stuff like, a lot of times we obsess over details that don't make that much difference. But if the athlete perceives it to make a difference, then it does make a difference. So like, I couldn't agree more when you say, look, if an athlete's happy, then regardless of whether anything physical has changed, no one wants to be working on something they're rubbish at 2 weeks from the biggest fight of their life.
I think as well on the back of that, if you've got something that's really important to that athlete, and that, for example, they probably take the most boxers would probably take the most confidence from improving on their fitness assessments. That's what I would think.
Yeah.
If you double that value and you say, if you were to brush over it and say, all right, yeah, it's gone up 5%, whatever your 30-15 score. If you were to brush over it, then that loses half its effectiveness. If you go to them like, wow, look how much this has improved, and you can show them video clips, you can show them Word documents, you can show them Excel graphs, everything. You place more value on that. That's just more confidence for that athlete, and you're doubling the effect of that 5% increase in fitness. And then that's where they start coming out with things like, oh, I'm in the best shape of my life.
Yeah.
Because they know they are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Mike Tyson, retirement 53, best shape he's ever been in. But that's also why I loved your plyometric RSI presentation, just because when you're showing drop jumps, yeah, it might tweak with athletes who are early adopters and actively looking for their problems to be solved. But as soon as you've got a video of, I don't know, Pete McGrail, 2-phase attacks, and the ankle's not buckling, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this S&C coach might actually know what he's on about.
Yeah. Potentially. I don't know. I'm trying.
Yeah, that's the lies I might be telling to myself. Who knows? In regards to, so we've spoken a little bit about reverse engineering, training strengths and weaknesses. Something we spoke off air about, which I really liked and want to get into, is energy system training for boxers. So you mentioned when you were training your footballers that you were sort of approached, given your boxing experience and the whole sort of the outside view that boxers potentially could be some of the fittest athletes. How do you develop a conditioned boxer at Boxing Science?
So Alan would give you a miles better answer than me, and it's a weaker area of mine, but I can give it an okay go. I would, most of the time, your boxer looks like an endurance athlete, whether that's a product of their boxing training or their conditioning training. Typically, this gets thrown around a lot, but typically your boxer does 10K road runs, things like that. And I think that this has shifted. I think that in the past 10 years, I think you've got a lot more boxers going up to the track and things like that, which is excellent, because we're shifting towards more. We do sprint interval training. That's one of the first things we do with our boxers when they first come in, and they typically don't perform too well on it because they're not capable of producing these really, really high intensities, and they can't coordinate, and they can't get the intent, and they don't know how it feels to sprint and dig and switch on and be twitchy and explosive and rapid. So that, unlocking that potential, can be just a massive, massive gain into their boxing performance, because rather than let's say their peak performance intensity, and this is represented by an amount of punches, which is equivalent to sprinting this fast. You've just raised that there. So now when they work at this intensity, this is more submaximal, regardless of where aerobic fitness is. So this is starting to get into the concept of like anaerobic speeds, reserves and stuff like that. But as soon as you lift the absolute intensity someone can perform at, you make everything else more submaximal. And when you start to look at repeating and recovering that, obviously that's where the aerobic system and your buffering capacity and things like that comes in. So what I would argue is that any boxing athlete, if they can't, no matter how you express that force, probably the best way to express it is through sprinting, and probably the best way is to express that through sprinting on the Woodway curve, because just remove that impact. But if they can't do that, you're probably missing out on quite a bit. Now we've had like situations where we had boxers who've come in and they're like, if they're more towards the end of their career, you're probably going to find it really hard to develop that with them. So this word low-hanging fruit always springs to mind, but it sounds daft, but you can probably get them, going back to the super strength thing before, if they're really good at endurance, then just carry on working them at endurance. But if you've got a lot more time to work with someone like Danny and Alan have done an amazing job with Jordan Gill, like it turned him into a high-intensity athlete. And Jordan says now he feels like a 400, 800 metre runner. Mm-hmm. And Alan would argue that he says that is probably what the physiological profile of a boxer should there or thereabouts reflect. Like, when you look at the 800 metre runners, they're capable of running seriously, seriously fast. But then they've got the aerobic capacity to be able to repeat that as well. And then as you get further away from that, then your maximal sprint speed becomes less of a limiting factor. Mm-hmm. Would that sort of make sense? Like,
yeah, spot on. Funny you used to say that, because a chap who I interned under, Mark Campbell, who I believe you've had deliver stuff for you guys at Boxing Science, he said one of the most impressive feats of athleticism he's ever seen. Bearing in mind he's worked with GB boxers, he's worked with GB divers, he's worked with international rugby teams. He said the best feat of athleticism he ever saw was David Radisha's 800 metre world record in London 2012. So I think that answer sounds spot on. You mentioned, so let's say I'll give you two options. Yeah, I can either give you a boxer who is lightning quick, explosive, but let's just say not very fit, or I give you a boxer who is fit, whatever that means to them, but not very fast. Which boxer would you prefer to have coming in at the start of training camp?
So you fit a boxer, and my answer, like, I reckon if you ask me this again in 10 minutes' time, it's probably going to change. But right now, I would say that Danny nails this. As soon as you get the boxer coming in to camp, there's a massive spike in training load. I would say that your fitter boxer with a better VO2 max would probably be better able to tolerate that. So just because they're able to recover, they're able to go again, not only within sessions and between sessions. However, on the flip side of the coin, it's probably harder to, if you take a kid at maybe like 20, something like that, 20, 21, 22, same age as me now, it's probably harder to make him faster and more explosive and stronger than it is to make you fitter. No, than it is to make you faster, you're stronger, you're more explosive boxer, fitter.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So it all depends. I think it's probably easier to make it's probably easier to make your faster boxer fit than it is to make your fitter boxer, more endurance type, fast. But it can be done. It can be done both ways. It depends on what you place value on, what's important to that athlete as well. Like if they take a lot of confidence from being really good on the 5Ks, and you've not got that long to work with them, probably keep them what they're good at as well, and then that's where you adjust it over time.
Yeah, I thought, as you said, I think your answer reflects actually how difficult that question is. I remember looking at, I think it was a podcast with a guy called Chris Hinshaw, and he talks about whether you've got an athlete, as we said there, who is fit but not fast but not fit, and saying that being fast, as you said, you need a coordinated athlete, you need an athlete with good ranges of motion, you need an athlete with good levels of strength to be able to express that force. I mean, just as a personal anecdote, like I remember running the 400 meters and trying to improve my 400 meter score coming off the back of my powerlifting. And I could nail a pretty good 400 meter time, but it took me about 3 days to recover. But I think it's easier to get somebody fitter because you're like, we're just going to do more of this stuff that you're already technically good at. We just need to develop it for longer. But as you said, same as you, mate, ask me in 10 minutes, I may well change my answer.
That's fair, innit?
You did I could be wrong in this, but you did either your master's or your dissertation on velocity-based training. Is that right? Yeah,
that's what I looked at for I ended up, I did it for my undergraduate, and then I ran out of ideas I didn't have any ideas for my master's one. So I just did this slightly the same study again, but better. And I think the two together made, obviously it's not published or anything like that, but the two together made for quite an interesting little piece. So I looked at the trap bar deadlift, and I really enjoyed this. I really got stuck into it. I looked at the trap bar deadlift, and I wanted to know that with boxers, what is the optimal load relative to their 1 rep max to work at for improving impulse and rate of force development. So essentially, rather than looking at this, is being looked at in power a lot, but power, force times velocity, isn't really a limiting factor to punch performance. Impulse and rate of force development is. So I wanted to look at, for impulse and rate of force development, what is the optimal load to work at. So we got them lifting at 30, 40, 50, 60, up to 90% 1 rep max, doing 3 reps of it. And we also got the gym aware strapped to it as well. So even if you didn't know your optimal relative load, you'd have a velocity range to work at. And I think it was about, for rate of force development, it was between 30 and 40%. In the trap bar deadlift study, it was between 30 and 60% of rate of your 1 rep max is optimal for rate of force development. So that was my conclusion. Obviously, I wasn't able to outright prove this with stats, but that was my observation as well. And then in my second study for my master's, with the trap bar deadlift, you have to stop at the top. So immediately, by not jumping, you're limiting the force production and you're limiting the rate of force development. And that isn't really a great to lift a light load really fast, but then stop at the end. It's not a very coordinated skill. It doesn't look great. It doesn't feel great to an athlete. So then we looked at, all right, in a trap bar jump, which I know Chris Toombs uses a lot and I picked up from him. So trap bar jump, tense up, jive up from the floor. If we go at the equal loads, we work between 30, 40, 50 and 60% 1 rep max. We looked at what is the optimal load for optimizing this rate of force development. And then what was interesting is we found that between 30 and 40% of the trap bar deadlift 1RM, if you jump with that, that's optimal for rate of force development. But it varies from athlete to athlete, but as a general rule of thumb. And then that's also about half of the athlete's jump height as well. So if you can jump 40 centimeters and then you load up the barbell till you can jump with 20 centimeters, you're probably in a good position for developing rate of force development. The other interesting thing off the back of it as well, I compared the two studies, and then I looked at what is the difference between 70 and 90% in terms of peak force, which is what we'd associate with max strength work. And there wasn't a significant difference between lifting 70% of your 1 rep max and 90%. So essentially, off the back of that, it left me with a question: can we develop max strength with 70% 1RM, with 80% 1RM? Is there that need, as long as we're lifting it as quick as we can with gym aware, is there that need to go to 90%, 100%? That was the question I was left with it, and that's a discussion for another day. And then I looked at it again, the two studies together, and I compared 90% trap bar deadlift, which is your highest peak force values, and then I compared 40 and 50% and 60% trap bar jump. You see more peak force in 50 and 60% trap bar jump, where I think you're jumping about 25% of your max height. So you see more peak force in the 50 and 60% trap bar jump than you do in the 90% trap bar deadlift. So my argument is, off the back of that, even though it's 50 and 60%, that's a stimulus for developing max strength and max force. to get to that point where you can safely jump with that is probably quite challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But with 40 and 50% of your trap bar deadlift, you can probably get an athlete jumping in, and you know that's a good stimulus for developing maximum force. So we've got the jump height. So if you don't know your 1RMs, you can go off your jump height. We can also go off velocity as well. This is around 0.9 to 1.1 meters per second. That seems to be a really good zone for developing rate of force development. And also we've got the load as well. So if you've got neither of those things, just see how much can you lift, and then right, half it, now jump with it. So that's a pretty good indicator. So the two studies together, I was pretty pleased with it by the end, because I had some okay answers and some okay questions off the back of it to generally know where we are about the right line.
So my key take-homes from that, if I've understood you correctly, because this is something I've always wondered, is, so firstly, in terms of strength development, arguably there's no need to ever go above 90%, if I understand that correctly.
I didn't measure 100. The thing is with really heavy loads, like you're practicing the tension, and there's so much benefit to going between 95 and 100%. There's like structural adaptations, there's confidence, there's all things, there's setting PRs, great stuff. But what I found was the difference between 70 and 90%. If you lift that weight as fast as you can, there's no significant difference in the force production.
And this is just in lifts. Is this in explosive lifts, or is it, so for example, is this a trap bar jump, or is this just a trap bar deadlift?
But you wouldn't get off the floor with above 60% on a trap bar jump.
That's actually really useful to know, because obviously, just using myself as an example, a lot of people, and I'm sure you find this, that as soon as you can't get the feedback of a device or something, then all of a sudden velocity-based training requires an athlete to really be motivated, especially if, I don't know, your remote program. So knowing that you're not going to get off the floor with more than 60% is actually a really useful indicator for those who don't train with velocity-based equipment.
There or thereabouts, that's a general rule of thumb. I think we had one lad who did get about 9 centimeters off the floor with 60%, but that was more just because he was quite explosive and he just wasn't great at heavy loads.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because in my head I'm doing the maths now and I'm thinking, right, as soon as gyms reopen, let me load up the trap bar with what's probably going to be a lot less than 50% of my old 1RMs and see if I can get off the floor.
Yeah, I would think that now we can use that, like, so if you've got a set of dumbbells, or if you were to have 24 kettlebells and you're jumping with them, you're probably going to do an okay job of, because you're probably hitting some good peak force values, so you're probably doing an okay job of protecting your rate of force development and your exposure to some kind of peak force, because you're hitting similar positions as the deadlift. You're probably doing an okay job, I would argue.
Funny enough, that's where my next question was going to go, because if it's only 50 to 60%, and if you're not training powerlifters, like, that's a load that's not beyond all realm of possibility between, like, even if you, I don't know, say you've got a sibling and you put them on your back and you do a squat jump or something silly, like, that's going to put you in the ballpark somewhere, and it's certainly going to be a lot better than, you know, these death by reps bodyweight programs that I see people put out.
Yeah, I think so. So even if you've got 2 10 kilo dumbbells, and you can trap bar deadlift 100 kilos. Let's say you're a junior athlete and you've got 2 10 kilo dumbbells. If you jump with that load, that's 20%. You're only 10% off what we know is the optimal zone for rate of force development. So, and also the other thing I will say, that this can vary from athlete to athlete. So athletes that were slightly more weighted towards force production tended to be better as the weight got heavier. And then the athletes that were weighted towards velocity tended to be better as the weights were lighter in terms of relative to their 1RM. But like I say, if you've got 2 10 kilo dumbbells, you've got 2 15 kilo dumbbells, and you jump with that load, you're probably in a pretty good position for rate of force development and force production.
Yeah,
I would say.
I like that a lot. And again, I think a lot of athletes lose their mind because they think, I have to back squat during lockdown because my strength and conditioning program says back squat. when actually, as you said, you can actually achieve those loads, or so those adaptations quite handily with a lot less load than you arguably need. The one question, or the couple of questions I've got that I haven't asked yet, was you mentioned about youth athletes there. Now I know at Boxing Science you're big on sprint interval training and high intensity interval training. To what extent would you change or keep the same energy system type approach to a youth boxer? So I'm talking, just for context, a pre-adolescent youth boxer. So let's say, I don't know, 12, 13 years and below. To what extent would their energy system or strength and conditioning program look different to an adult boxer?
I think you see it as just more long term. So if our 13-year-old boxer is, let's say we've got a 13-year-old, he's had 20 bouts or something like that. It's Thursday, he's boxing on Saturday. We're probably less bothered about tapering him off than we would be someone who's 21 and is having their pro debut, something like that. So you see it as more long term, and each session is an opportunity to build this athlete up, make him robust, make him better at their sport, really. So I suppose you're less concerned about what's happening in the short term, even though you still want them to succeed and do really well, but you don't mind. You don't mind if short term doesn't go too well, I suppose, because long term, that's what you're after. At the end of the day, that's we're wanting to develop great senior boxers. That's the aim of the program. And what was your other question? Sorry, Todd.
To what extent would energy systems change? So just to give a little bit of background or a little bit of thinking time. So listeners who may or may not be aware, kids tend to be aerobic animals. Their anaerobic systems aren't that well developed, but they can go seemingly all day, as any parent will testify. So their anaerobic systems aren't that well developed. And I don't know how well this has been researched compared to an adult control group. But the question was, to what extent would an energy systems program for a boxer change if they're, say, a young boxer, let's say 12 and below, versus an adult boxer?
I don't think this is something we've really considered, because we remember that even though we're like, you want to develop a great athlete, and it's quite general at first, and we do a lot more things that are considered athletic rather than specialised to boxing with the youth athletes. But I don't think that we've really considered it, because the demands of the sport are still the same. Like, you've got to be fast, you've got to be fit. I would say that I would rather my athlete at a young age develops their ability to be twitching, to know what it feels like to sprint. Like, if they've never sprinted, and also, like, the ones who really struggle are the ones who haven't played football, haven't played rugby, because they don't know what it feels like to switch and be anaerobic and twitching. They don't know what it feels like to switch on. So to coordinate that sprinting, to be able to achieve high intensity adaptations from your conditioning work, that's probably quite tough. So I'd say, like, learning to sprint around growth spurt time, probably managing that as well. Whether you manage volume, whether you tailor off the volume a little bit and you just work for intensity, or vice versa. I suppose you work with what's in front of you. But in the past, we've always done more sprinting than we've done high intensity conditioning work, because I suppose they're getting a lot of that from the boxing anyway. So you're filling in the gaps. And then also, like I keep going back to this before, like, it's probably easier to make a fit athlete, a fast athlete fit, rather than a fit athlete fast. And when you, I don't know how much of this is backed up by the science, but when you're around like 12 to 16, isn't that when you start to shape what you look like an athlete long term? Is that right? Like, and you start looking at how your fiber types generally start to set, and you start to, when you start to specialize in how physiologically you look. And I think am I right in saying that obviously part of that is genetic, but part of that is shaped by what you do as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there's certainly a coordination. Like, in in Rodri Lloyd's book, Strength and Conditioning for the Youth Athlete, he talks about synaptic pruning, which is basically the way that the brain talks to each other. The parts of the brain talk to each other. And basically, the more crosstalk you have, so the more the different parts of the brain talk to each other during that pre-adolescent phase, the more likely it is that the brain will decide to hold on to those skills moving forward. So I completely agree in terms of making the coordination your priority, because I've worked with loads of kids, especially in a PE setting, and you'd be amazed at some of the sprinting mechanics. Like one of the schools I worked with, they had the cover of the sports day brochure, if you want to call it that, and there was kids starting with left arm forward and left foot forward. And you're like, how has your brain decided that that is the optimum way to run as fast as physically possible? So getting in those coordination tasks while you've still got, not calling it a window of opportunity, but where you've got an accelerated period of learning new skills, I guess. So yeah, I'd completely agree. And it's interesting. I personally don't think there's enough research on it, but from what I've seen, there was a decent paper presented at the Child to Champion conference in 2019, which had, I believe it was, they had young kids and adults doing a 10-second on the minute, every minute max peak power on a watt bike. And basically, again, for the people who are listening to this rather than watching it, it just completely dropped off a cliff for adults. But for the kids, literally like rep after rep was pretty much the same, whereas the adults were so powerful or too powerful in order to recover sufficiently within the rest of the minute time. So yeah, it's interesting, and I completely agree with you. It's an area that, as far as energy systems training is concerned, does require a lot more research, in my opinion.
I've not looked into that nowhere near enough, and I've not considered it, but I think as well, like, do I probably need to consider it too much? Like you work with what's in front of you, and also kick the kids that we've worked with when we've put on our youth sessions, they love being fast. They love being fast, and they love being a lot more than they love being out of breath. So that's another thing to consider as well, isn't it? Like,
yeah, spot on. I feel like I was going to say something else there in relation to that, but I feel like you've kind of stolen the point there. But like you said, if you can develop those skills early, and also, that was what I was going to say, in regards to plugging the gaps. If you go to boxing clubs up and down the country, there's a strong chance you're going to see a lot of conditioning type work, which just generally gets people out of breath. What you're probably not going to see is long rest periods where you're looking for maximum physical output in, say, that 10 to 30 second burst, and then a 5 to 10 minute rest. You're probably not going to see that, mainly because people are paying for, say, an hour and a half session, and you just can't afford to be resting 5-10 minutes between an explosive effort.
And someone did a tweet about this the other day, and saying that like true speed work needs to have 5 to 10 minutes of rest. And like I can't see how realistically you can get that without your kids losing interest. And like, so that would dictate to me, like, how can you creatively come up with ways of getting them working at high intensities and being able to repeat them as well, and so that doesn't drop. So
yeah, and I think with a lot of kids, the growth spurt will almost take care of the improved sprinting speeds themselves. Like a friend of mine works for a company that tests kids up and down the country for athletic prowess, and basically with no strength conditioning whatsoever, kids improve just because of obviously the growth spurt. And then the interesting thing for them is then seeing where S&C is concerned, what improvements are bigger than the smallest worthwhile change that you would expect to see just by simply kids getting older. So I think if you improve a kid's coordination, it doesn't even have to be sprint specific coordination. Like one of the CPD events I went to with Jared Deacon, who's went to the Commonwealth, I think he's 4x4 or 4x1 100, and he said he went to a school in the Northeast and just had kids touch their left hand to their right foot, right hand to right foot, and then the same but behind their body. And he said that's his sprinting assessment. And he said he had out of 100 kids, 3 kids could coordinate that movement. And he said, right, before we even talk about sprint mechanics, do kids know how to hop, how to skip, how to jump? Because that's where the low-hanging fruit's going to lie in terms of getting kids faster, because they just get more coordinated.
Yeah. That's first of all, that's mad. I like it though. I like it. I'd love to discuss that more.
It also shows how we as S&C coaches can almost get lose ourselves within specific stuff. So I need to get them faster, therefore I need to get them sprinting. And it's like, but if he doesn't know his arse from his elbow, then saying, right, we need to pull your toe up whilst we're looking at this position, whilst we've got this shin angle, and obviously all that goes out the window.
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, go on. I was going to say that the constraints hopefully play a big role in that as well. Like if you can do it in disguise, like, so this is why things like the wicket runs and stuff like that, they're great pieces of kit on there. Well, we're going off slightly off tangent, but I think that also has the job of highlighting who is coordinated as well. And I think you can pick those things out as well, can't you?
Yeah, and tangent's good. Funny enough, I think it was episode 13, I spoke to a guy called Tom Green, who's head of athletic development at a school in the Southwest. And he basically had two cohorts. I think they might have been year 7, year 8. And basically one cohort did like what we would call more traditional S&C in terms of sprint mechanics, A skips, B skips, a proper speed program, if you will. He had his other cohort literally just play games like tag, rounders, and stuff that is going to drive intent in children. And basically said he still needs someone to do the statistics for him, but just looking at the times that kids got and how much better they got. Kids got better by games just because there was an intent to want to be the fastest kid. Whereas, talking about shin angles and sprinting 10 meters and, kids just switch off.
Intent's massive. That's why I'm so big on the velocity based training. That if I can't do that, I'm working in the one-to-one scenarios, then it's the my jump app. A little bit more time consuming, but even on as much feedback as you can get, whether it's a jump map, whether it's timing gates, whether even a stopwatch is. I've had the stopwatch out loads this season, because even though I know it's not the most accurate thing in the world, I know it gets intent out of them. And we do like flying 10-meter sprints where they'll have a 20-meter run in, and then it's how quick can you get from A to B. I'm stood at the side with a stopwatch. Like sometimes on way out, I know I am, but over the course of the season, looking at averages, they've gone down, and that's been massive. Just for getting, they know that if they get a 1.4, they're like, oh, and then they know if they get a 1.2, they're buzzing, and then to get that 1.2 again on the flying 10 or something like that on my stopwatch, they just do what they did last time, and they just do whatever they were thinking about last time, whatever I told them, or whether pretty much it's going to be usually what they've told themselves to make themselves quicker, and they're just going to do that again. And then I've not had to say anything. I've got the intent out of them. I've got what I wanted out of them, and also they're enjoying it. And I found with the girls that they love the numbers. They're all bright girls as well, and they love knowing there's that thing about knowledge of results and feedback of results and stuff like that. Whatever it is, I don't really know, but they love knowing what they've got. They love knowing how they've done and how that influences our program as well. So.
No, spot on. I'm also worried of taking up too much of your time, mate. The one question I've got left, a couple of questions before I got left. The first one is, if you could spend a period of time with a coach and their athletes, who would you want to spend time with and why?
I've really been a big fan of the juggernaut strength stuff, and watching they were putting out quite a lot of fly on the wall stuff where they were coaching their weightlifters and the powerlifters, and I think the stuff they've put out for years has been absolutely fantastic. So Max Aita and Chad Wesley Smith, and I love watching them coach on the YouTube videos and watching the same videos back multiple times, and I don't know how much they're thinking about their coaching, because they're at a level where they can just do it now. But one of the things Max Aita said, he was like, with someone doing a power clean, and he went, do it again, but do it better. And he tidied it up. And it's like, how was that worked? But saying that to someone, right, let's do it again, but let's do it better. I've like tried that since, and that works. And like, I can't say why it works, but like, and sometimes that a little bit of a sigh, or like watching them coach, like even a sigh or a tut or just saying nothing has such a big impact. So that's when to say it, what to say it, and being very calm as well. That's, especially in the weight room, I think that's been massive. In terms of on the pitch, sorry, I know you said one
No,
coach.
name as many as you want. If you want to name a boxing coach as well, I don't know, just jumping in. I'd love to see someone like Freddie Roach or Mayweather Senior just to see
Yeah,
what they do. But any coach, doesn't even have to be S&C.
definitely. I think in a similar style to that would be like someone like Rob McCracken, someone like that. And then Stuart McMillan working with the Altis setup and Jonas Dodi. How they coach their sprinters is absolutely fascinating. And the stuff they're getting into where it's considering how they cue an athlete based on their physiological profile. So if they've got someone with a really good RSI, like bounces down the track, they cue them to bounce. And if they've got someone that's more hamstring dominant and pulls their way down the track, they cue them to pull. That stuff's amazing. I think that's really, really, really good stuff. And I'd love to learn a lot more about that.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about like changing your mind every 10 minutes. Like sometimes I hear stuff like that, I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. There's really a science behind it. And then you hear stuff like, yeah, that, but better. And you're like, is this coaching malarkey really this difficult? Who knows?
I think it's a lot of it is based around how you are as well. And if I'm watching an NFL coach and they get a lot out of their athletes and the sessions look amazing, and they're shouting and they're doing all this stuff and they're very vocal. But if I tried to do that, that wouldn't fit my personality, and that I'd just come across as a bit of a fraud. So I think you should pick the bits that apply, don't you? So.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And if you, again, I appreciate we've we've gone about S&C for business, S&C for parents, boxers. We kind of chucked a whole load at you. If you wanted there to be one key take home from this podcast, what would you like it to be?
I'd say measure and feedback. That's because without measuring what you're doing, whether that's RPE, whether it's training load, whether it's how fast they are, whether it's how strong they are, what they're shifting on the barbell, whatever. If you're not measuring it, then how do you know if you're getting better? And you've got to track these things as well. And the other thing is, once you've got this information, feed it back, because that's been massive for me, because if you can get an athlete in a position where they draw confidence from the feedback and you identify what feedback they like as well, I think you're onto a winner with them. Sorry, I had a phone call coming through. Sorry, Todd.
That's all right, mate. That's all right. I should have let you go like a couple of minutes ago. You would have been able to take it. Just want to say thanks very much, Tommy. That's been absolutely awesome. And as I said, it always ends up being the way that I ping 1,000,001 questions and only about 3 of them are sent over in the initial document. So thank you for navigating that as well as you have done, mate. I've really enjoyed that.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Like it's been a good few weeks because I've had a good few chances to talk to different people like yourself and like-minded coaches. And I think what you're doing with this podcast and what you're doing in terms of working with youth athletes as well and wanting to deliver best practice to them is absolutely amazing. So keep up the good work yourself.
I'll do my best, man. It'd be good to have you maybe as a part 2 and talk more about your game sharp performance stuff, because obviously we've gone very boxing heavy with this one, but I feel like we may be going another hour if I dug into that properly. So maybe we'll have to have a part 2 on the cards.
Nice one. No, thanks very much. Cheers.
My pleasure, mate. Take it easy.
Cheers.